What are the craziest declassified CIA documents? The plan after September 11 to make figurines that look like Osama bin Laden and give them to kids in South Asia. After it's left in the sun for a certain amount of time, its face would peel off to reveal a demon-like visage with red skin, green eyes, and black markings, basically a demon. The objective was to scare kids and their parents so bin Laden and Al-Qaeda would lose support. The acoustic kitty is pretty crazy. Declassified CIA docs linked at bottom of Wikipedia page, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/acoustic_kitty $WPROV=SFLA1. They basically put a microphones and radio in a cat and tried to release into the Soviet embassy to wander around eavesdropping since nobody suspects a wandering cat. Technical difficulties, citation needed episode, https://youtube.be/gcrjr9xqsa=000ICN4WOCNU5Q, that I learned about it from. One CIA operative, who drew up a plan to have packets of extra-large condoms, labeled small dropped on USSR. The idea was to lower their morale. The Pentagon Papers, which were leaked, not outright declassified, and the resultant Church Committee report. These are what made public the CIA's actions in overthrowing governments and instigating/assisting coups all over the world for decades leading up to the 70s. Pretty much every negative stereotype of the CIA we have today was created or informed by the Pentagon Papers and Church Committee report. Psychological warfare in the Philippines in the 1950s comes to mind. The CIA conducted research to figure out which sort of myths and superstitions the Philippine people had. They discovered that they were afraid of vampires. At one point they disrupted a group by snatching a local man, murdering him, and putting teeth marks on his neck. They then hung him upside down for his friends to find, which terrified the village. This was all part of an effort to elect Ramon Magsaysay as president, who basically acted as a puppet for the US. The CIA wrote his speeches and directed his policy. All the failed assassination attempts against Fidel Castro. According to Fabian Escalante, who worked for the Cuban counterintelligence, there were 638 of them. Here are some highlights. Asterisk in 1960 they tried to poison his cigars. Asterisk they asked the Chicago mob for help and they said poison pills are the best. The mobsters hired a local assassin, who gave them to an ice cream/milkshake parlor employee who was supposed to slip them into Castro's ice cream. When he tried to get the poison pills from the freezer, they were frozen solid on the coils of the freezer. Asterisk they planned to put explosives under a painted seashell, as Castro loved to go scuba diving and collect seashells. The plan was discarded as impractical. Asterisk in the same year they contaminated a scuba diving suit for Castro with a fungus that should give Castro a deadly disease. The person tasked with this, American lawyer James Donovan, who was negotiating the release of hostages after the Bay of Pigs invasion, couldn't do it in the end. Asterisk they trained his lover to poison him, but she got cold feet. Asterisk they had a James Bond-like idea of poisoning him with a tiny needle attached to a ballpoint pen. The government official who was supposed to stab him with that needle, threw the pen away, as he was too afraid that the needle might accidentally poison him instead. Asterisk last but not least they had the idea to assassinate his character by spraying a LSD-like chemical into the broadcasting studio where he held his speeches. The idea was to make him look confused and unfit to rule. The plan was abandoned as the chemical was unreliable. Edit. Some corrections to the second and sixth attempt in this list. Operation Sea Spray, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/operation_C-spray, a 1950 U.S. Navy secret biological warfare experiment in which Serratia marcescens and Bacillus globigii bacteria were sprayed over the San Francisco Bay Area in California, in order to determine how vulnerable a city like San Francisco may be to a bioweapon attack. Between 1949 and 1969, open-air tests of biological agents were conducted 239 times. In 80 of those experiments, the Army said it used live bacteria that its researchers at the time thought were harmless. The pardon of the Japanese who ran Unit 731 in exchange for their findings. They performed countless experiments on live human cows, cutting off limbs to test blood loss, injecting them with diseases and seeing how they progressed when left untreated, vivisection of these same individuals, and other really fucking disgusting stuff that I don't have the stomach to type out. You can Google the rest. The US government felt it was more important to have that information in American hands than to let it go to the Russians, or be lost. You'd never be able to conduct those kind of experiments again, and for good reason, so they considered it the lesser of two evils. The attempts and further plans to kill Castro were straight up Looney Tunes shit, including, but not limited to, exploding cigars. MK Ultra, but unfortunately the only documents we got from it are from an off-site storage space that the officials in the CIA forgot about. Also the CIA document that says the political structure of the USSR wasn't a one-man one rule or the one talking about how Tibet was a feudal backwater. CIA checking what we know. Project Paperclip, taking former Nazi scientists from Germany to America to hopefully beat the Soviets in the space race. One of the craziest declassified CIA documents is Operation Midnight Climax, where the CIA dosed unsuspecting individuals with LSD as part of mind control experiments. It reads like a spy novel, but unfortunately, it's a disturbing chapter in history. The ghost tapes with creepy noises that were played in Vietnam to try and scare the Viet Cong was pretty crazy. Not the most crazy, but worth a mention. Probably that the US government worked with the company Chiquita Banana to assassinate South American leaders they didn't like to replace them with more agreeable ones that would allow the company to take control of so much of the country and in return would supply the USA with resources. US military advisors saying that an armed conflict in Vietnam can't be won due to the general sentiment and freedom movement they'd fight. That the Vietnamese liberation movement would continue no matter what or who would actually end up leading it. Second being Nixon sabotaging and delaying peace talks in Vietnam so he could blame it as LBJ's failure and win the election. My previous answer to another post. https://www.theblackvault.com. Not sure if this has been mentioned or not, I'm not scrolling through a million replies. The site is run by a guy named John Greenewald, u/Blackvault, started putting in FOIA requests when he was 15 and never stopped. Currently has what is arguably the largest privately owned collection of declassified information from the US government anywhere, and the entire archive is accessible for free. Not a direct answer to your question, but anything you want to know about stuff the US government was up to can be found buried in there, and he's taken the time to sort some of the more interesting stuff out to make browsing easier. Cheers. Operation Northwoods. The DOD proposed that CIA operatives plant bombs around the United States and commit terrorist acts and blame them on Cuba. This was approved all the way up to, but not including, the President. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/operation_Northwoods. The papers describing astral projection. They brought a psychic in and placed an envelope with coordinates and a time frame on it. They asked him to describe what he saw. He described dying planet where people had left to discover a new place they could populate. It was revealed that the envelope contained coordinates on Mars in the distant past. It gets much more in-depth where he describes large structures, etc. It's not very long and very much worth the read. Edit. https://www.cia.gov/reading-room/doc/cia-rdp96-00788R00190076001-9.pdf. MK Ultra, the mind control operation. You can download most of Osama bin Laden's hard drive off the CIA's website. It's got a fair few licensed movies, anime, games, that sort of thing. All free for anyone who wants to get it. 100% The Gateway Experience. https://www.cia.gov/reading room/doc/cia-rdp96-00788R001700116-5.pdf, like this shit is fucking bonkers. Declassified doc from 1983 detailing the CIA's usage of harmonic resonance to gain access to the astral plane. It describes how the CIA used astral projection to create force fields around military bases, visit the future, and even talk to literal God. They call God the Absolute, which they claim is all of the universe compiled into a single point for a single moment in time, after which the universe re-expands. Seriously, read this shit if you have a mind for the creepy/unexplained. There's even a page missing, page 25, which presumably went over how Christianity was a failed interpretation. At the end of pg 24 they're talking about the Holy Trinity and seem to be readying up for a big explanation, then pg 25 is completely missing. Northwoods documents Operation Northwoods, Wikipedia, https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/operation_Northwoods. Operation Northwoods. The fact that the idea was even floated at one point is quite disturbing. https://en.m.wikipedia.org/wiki/operation_Northwoods. Operation Paperclip still blows my mind. When the Space Shuttle Challenger was destroyed, it was reported that all 7 astronauts were killed instantly. It was revealed decades later that some, if not all of the astronauts survived the initial explosion, as the cockpit cabin had enough protection to not be breached. For 2 minutes and 45 seconds, they were awake and aware, as they plummeted toward the Atlantic Ocean. Understandably, NASA knew that the news of their terrifying death would have crippled the space program even more than it already was. MKUltra. https://www.cia.gov/reading room/doc/cia-rdp96-00788R001700116-5.pdf. The analysis and assessment of Gateway process is a wild read. Does only U.S. intelligence agency declassifies their documents? Because at this point I'm familiar with most of it but have no idea about KGB, MI6, RA etc. And I'm not talking about rumors but legit declassified confidential documents. Should be interesting to see what other CIA counterparts were up to. The Tuskegee experiments. The CIA examining the pole shifts causing great cyclical catastrophes. https://www.cia.gov/reading room/doc/cia-rdp79B00752A00030007001-8.pdf. CIA black sites. Sectet prisons where terrorist suspects were taken for interrogation/prison sentences and God knows what. Some sites were in Europe too, Poland and Lithuania. Not CIA but FBI, COINTELPRO. The origin operation of the infamous letter, https://upload.wikimedia.org/wikipedia/common/5/milk-uncovered-letter.png, to Martin Luther King Jr. to convince him to commit suicide. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/COINTELPRO. Robert Monroe and the Gateway Experience. You can go further and find the courses somewhere online. Truly great if you are into meditation and altered states of consciousness. It was and still is the best learning in life I had. I mean learning to lucid dream on command. And that's just one tool among others to truly know yourself and more. MK Ultra. The CIA cafeteria drama goes hard. Project Azoria is pretty crazy. It should be a movie with just how absurd it is. Amazing that it actually happened. The gay bomb is one I haven't seen mentioned yet. Also that the self-immolation of Thich Quang Duc was the death nail to the US winning in Vietnam. The US knew the population was against the war and didn't support it. Thich Quang Duc was the last straw as far as having any support at all in the country. The intelligence agencies knew at that point any further actions would have zero chance of winning the war. Now the darkest part, the US didn't leave Vietnam till 1975, so 12 years of pissing away men and materials for nothing, as winning was completely impossible since 1963. The CIA used spies. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/project_Merrimack, inside the US to monitor US citizens with the intent of supposedly protecting CIA facilities. The CIA terror attacks in Cuba, and we still have no idea how many people were killed. Project 2, directed at infiltration of foreign intelligence targets by agents posing as dissident sympathizers and which, like chaos, had placed agents within domestic radical organizations for the purposes of training and establishment of dissident credentials. Project Merrimack, designed to infiltrate domestic anti-war and radical organizations thought to pose a threat to security of CIA property and personnel. Project Resistance, worked with college administrators, campus security, and local police to identify anti-war activists and political dissidents without any infiltration taking place. Also, the CIA has spied on Congress. https://www.cnn.com/2014/07/31/CIA-spying-senate-apologize/index.html. And of course there were no charges leveled.